The clink of silverware against porcelain echoed through my dining room like a gunshot. I'll never forget the sound of that fork hitting Lucas's plate, or the way my grandson's eyes widened as he stared at the number circled in red ink. 32,084.29. Every dollar I had silently given to my family over the years, college loans paid off, medical bills covered, house deposits, birthdays made possible. And yet, 5 minutes earlier, they were calling me bitter, unappreciative, jealous of Jason's success. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to how it all began. My name is Margaret Reynolds, Maggie to most folks. I live in a modest neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the houses are neat but not fancy, and where most people know each other's business, whether you want them to or not. I've lived in the same 3-bedroom ranch-style home for 32 years. It's the house where I raised my children after their father, Mark, passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack when Jason was in his second year of college and Rachel was just starting high school. The day of Mark's funeral remains burned in my memory, the crushing weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders as I watched them lower my husband's casket into the ground. I remember Jason's stiff upper lip, trying so hard to be the man of the family now, and Rachel, my beautiful daughter, sobbing uncontrollably against my side. In that moment, I made a silent vow to Mark and to myself. I would do whatever it took to make sure our children would be okay. For 23 years, I kept that promise. I worked as a school secretary, not a glamorous job, but one with steady hours and decent benefits. I stretched every dollar, clipped coupons religiously, drove the same Honda Civic until it practically fell apart. I went without new clothes, cancelled my own dental work and put off replacing my mattress, the same one Mark and I had shared, even though a spring had started poking through on my side. Also, my children could have what they needed. Jason graduated with honors and went on to get his MBA. He married Emily, a polished woman with expensive taste who never seemed entirely comfortable around me. They bought a beautiful colonial in Myers Park, one of Charlotte's most prestigious neighborhoods. Rachel had a rockier path, 2 career changes, a divorce, and the challenge of raising Lucas as a single mum. She lives in a small condo across town, always just one financial emergency away from disaster. And me, I became the family safety net, the emergency fund, the last-minute savior. I never kept track of the money I gave them. It wasn't about the dollars, it was about love. When Jason needed help with his MBA tuition, I liquidated some of Mark's life insurance. When Rachel's ex-husband left her with a mountain of debt, I quietly paid off her credit cards. When Lucas needed special tutoring after his parents' divorce affected his schoolwork, I covered it without question. "It's just temporary, Mum," they'd always say. "I'll pay you back when things turn around." But they never did, and I never asked. Then came last Sunday, Jason's promotion party. He'd been made senior vice president at his financial consulting firm, and Emily had arranged a catered celebration at their home. I arrived early to help set up, wearing my best dress, the navy blue one I saved for special occasions. "Oh, Mom," Emily said when she saw me, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "That's nice, but we're going for a more upscale look today. Maybe you could just help in the kitchen?" I swallowed my pride and nodded, heading to the kitchen where I spent the next 3 hours arranging appetizers and washing dishes, while guests in designer clothes mingled in the living room. Rachel arrived late, dressed in clothes I knew she couldn't afford, with Lucas trailing behind her, his face buried in his phone. As the party wound down, I overheard Jason and Rachel talking in the hallway. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but when I heard my name, I paused. "Mom seems off today," Rachel said, her voice slightly slurred from too many glasses of champagne. "Did you see how she kept bringing up Dad? It's like she's stuck in the past." "I know," Jason replied with a sigh. "Emily thinks she's jealous of our success. Says Mom seems bitter that we've moved up in the world while she's still in that same old house." "It's exhausting," Rachel agreed. "Always the victim, always the martyr, like we owe her something for just doing what parents are supposed to do." Their words hit me like a physical blow. Bitter, jealous, after everything I'd sacrificed? I stood there, clutching a stack of dirty plates, feeling suddenly invisible in my own children's lives. That night, I drove home. In silence, their words replaying in my mind. For the first time in decades, I allowed myself to feel something beyond maternal devotion. Anger. Pure, justified anger. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I sat down at my kitchen table with my bank statements, checkbooks, and a notepad. I began tracking every dollar I'd given to my children over the years. Every loan never repaid. Every emergency covered. Every birthday gift that was actually a bill payment in disguise. It took me 3 days. When I was finished, I stared at the total, circled in red, 32,084 29s. Then I made a decision. I invited them all to dinner at my house the following Sunday. I told them I was making Mark's favorite pot roast, a family tradition. They agreed, though I could hear the reluctance in their voices. The dinner started pleasantly enough. I'd spent all day cooking, making sure everything was perfect. Jason talked about his promotion, Emily about their plans to remodel their kitchen, and Rachel complained about her boss. Lucas barely looked up from his phone except to eat. Then, as I was serving dessert, homemade apple pie, another family tradition, Jason cleared his throat. "Mom, Emily and I have been thinking. With my new position, we'll be entertaining a lot more. We were wondering if you'd be willing to help us upgrade our backyard. Nothing major, just a new patio set and maybe some landscaping." Rachel jumped in before I could respond. "And while we're at it, Lucas needs a new laptop for school. His is practically ancient." I placed the pie on the table and sat down, looking at my children's expectant faces. "Before we discuss that," I said calmly, reaching for the worn envelope I'd placed on the sideboard earlier, "there's something I'd like to show you." I slid the envelope across the table toward Jason. "Open it, please." He did, his expression curious at first, then increasingly uncomfortable as he flipped through the pages. "What is this?" he asked, his voice suddenly tight. "That," I said softly, "is every dollar I've given to both of you since your father died. Every loan never repaid. Every emergency I covered. Every bill I paid when you couldn't or wouldn't." Rachel snatched the envelope from Jason's hands, her face flushing as she scanned the pages. "You've been keeping tabs on us?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Like some kind of loan shark?" "No," I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Until 3 days ago I'd never added it up. I never wanted to. But then I heard you both at the party, calling me bitter, jealous of your success. That's when Lucas, who had been watching the adults with growing interest, leaned over to look at the papers. His eyes widened as he saw the total. And then it happened. The moment that will stay with me forever. His fork slipped from his fingers and clattered against his plate. The sound seemed to freeze time itself. No one spoke, not even Jason. It was the first time in years that my children looked at me and actually saw me. The silence that followed Lucas's dropped fork stretched into what felt like eternity. Rachel recovered first, shoving the papers back into the envelope with trembling hands. "This is completely inappropriate," she hissed, her cheeks flushed with anger or embarrassment, probably both. "What kind of mother keeps receipts on her children?" Jason still hadn't spoken. He sat staring at his half-eaten slice of pie, his jaw working silently, as if chewing on words he couldn't quite swallow. "I didn't keep receipts," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I kept you afloat. There's a difference." Emily shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her eyes darting between Jason and me. She'd always been polite but distant, treating me more like an obligation than family. Now she looked like she wanted to disappear into the floral pattern of her expensive blouse. "Grandma," Lucas said suddenly, his voice small but clear, "is that why you never go anywhere? Because of the money? Leave it to a child to cut straight to the heart of things." Lucas had always been perceptive, even as a toddler. His question hung in the air, honest and devastating. "I go places," I said, trying to smile. "I went to your science fair last month, but not like on vacation," he persisted. "Dad takes Mum to Cancun every year, and Uncle Jason and Auntie Emily went to Europe last summer. You never go anywhere." I felt a lump forming in my throat. The truth was, I hadn't taken a real vacation since Mark was alive. We'd always talked about seeing the Grand Canyon together, but then he died, and somehow there was always a more pressing need for the money. "I'm happy here," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. My home held memories that no resort could offer. Mark's height marks penciled inside the pantry door, the dent in the hallway wall from when Jason was learning to ride his skateboard indoors, the window seat where I'd read countless bedtime stories to Rachel. "This is emotional manipulation," Rachel snapped, pushing her plate away. "You're trying to make us feel guilty for living our lives." "No," I said, shaking my head. I'm trying. To make you see mine. I stood up and began clearing the dishes, a habit ingrained from decades of motherhood. Always cleaning up, always making things neat and tidy for everyone else. I never minded helping you both. That's what mothers do. But I did mind being called bitter, being treated like I'm jealous of your success when I've spent decades making sure you had the chance to succeed. I set the stack of dishes by the sink and turned to face them again. Do you know what I did with my retirement fund? The one I started when I first began working at Westfield Elementary. I used it to pay off your student loans, Jason. And Rachel, remember when your car broke down last year and you suddenly had the money to fix it? That was my vacation fund. Jason finally looked up, his expression unreadable. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have mattered, I asked quietly, or would you have just taken it as another sign that I was stuck in the past, as Rachel put it? The mention of her words from the party made Rachel flinch. Good. I wanted them to feel the sting of their own dismissal. You both have good lives, I continued. Jason, you have a beautiful home, a successful career. Rachel, you've overcome so much and raised an amazing son. I'm proud of you both. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as a person with my own hopes and dreams. I became just Mom, the backup plan, the safety net, the ATM that never says no. Emily cleared her throat, her discomfort palpable. Perhaps we should go, she suggested to Jason, who nodded and stood up. Lucas, get your jacket, Rachel said, already heading for the door. But we haven't finished dessert, Lucas protested, looking longingly at his half-eaten pie. Now, Lucas, Rachel insisted, her voice tight. I watched as they gathered their things, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Part of me wanted to take it all back, to tell them to stay, to apologize for making them uncomfortable. It's what I would have done in the past. Smoothed things over, made everything okay for everyone else, regardless of how I felt. But not this time. Before you go, I said as they headed for the door, I want you to know something. I'm not asking for the money back. I'm not even asking for an apology. All I want is respect, to be seen as more than just your mother, but as Maggie, a woman who had dreams before you were born and still has them now. Jason paused at the door, his hand on the knob. For a moment I thought he might turn around, might say something to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. But then Emily touched his arm, and whatever moment might have been there passed. They filed out silently, Rachel pulling Lucas along despite his backward glances. The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than a slam. I stood alone in my living room, the house suddenly too quiet, too empty. Had I gone too far? Had I destroyed the relationships I'd spent my entire adult life nurturing? The doubt crept in, cold and familiar, making me second-guess myself as I always did. But then I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway. Mirror. A woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of both laughter and tears. I barely recognized myself. When had I become so faded, so diminished in my own life? I walked slowly through my house, really seeing it for the first time in years. The sofa with its worn cushions, the carpet threadbare in places, the kitchen cabinets that needed repainting. All the little repairs and updates I'd postponed to send Rachel money for Lucas's summer camp, or to help Jason with the down payment on his first condo. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed Mark and I had shared, with the same mattress that now had a dip in the middle and a spring poking through on my side. I reached under the bed and pulled out an old shoebox, dusty with neglect. Inside were the dreams I'd put on hold, brochures for the Grand Canyon, a magazine article about the coastal town in Maine where Mark and I had honeymooned, with a note in my handwriting, for our 25th anniversary. We'd only made it to 18 years before the heart attack took him. There was also a course catalogue from the community college, the culinary arts program circled in pen. I'd always wanted to learn professional baking techniques, had dreamed of opening a small bakery in retirement. Mark had encouraged me, said my apple pie alone could make us millionaires. I ran my fingers over these remnants of dreams deferred, feeling a resolve strengthen within me. It wasn't too late. I was 62, not 92. There was still time to reclaim some part of myself, to be more than just mom or grandma. I picked up my phone and, before I could talk myself out of it, called Nancy, my friend from the school who'd been trying to get me to join her book club for years. Nancy, it's Maggie. Is that offer to join your book club still open? It was a small step, almost laughably so, But as I hung up the phone, having agreed to attend their meeting on Thursday, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, the faint stirring of possibility. That night I slept better than I had in years, dreamless and deep. When I woke the next morning, there were no texts or calls from my children, no apologies, no acknowledgements, just silence. And for once I was okay with that. The ball was in their court now. For the first time in decades, I wasn't rushing to fix things, to make everything better for everyone else. Instead, I made myself a proper breakfast, something I rarely bothered with when it was just me. As I sat at my kitchen table, enjoying scrambled eggs and toast, I realized that the heaviness I'd carried for years had lifted slightly. The burden of silent sacrifice, of unacknowledged giving had been named and therefore lightened. Whatever happened next? With my children, I knew one thing for certain. The invisible mother had finally made herself seen. 3 days passed without a word from either of my children. Each time my phone rang, my heart would leap, hoping it might be Jason or Rachel calling to talk things through. But it was never them. Just telemarketers, my friend Nancy confirming book club details, or the pharmacy letting me know my prescription was ready. I found myself checking my phone more often than I cared to admit, toggling between disappointment and a strange new feeling of liberation. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the one reaching out, smoothing things over, making the first move toward reconciliation. The silence was both painful and oddly empowering. On Wednesday afternoon, I was weeding my small vegetable garden when a familiar silver SUV pulled into my driveway. My heart stuttered as I watched Rachel emerge, alone and looking uncharacteristically subdued. She hesitated by her car for a moment before walking toward me, her steps measured and uncertain. "Hi, Mum," she said, stopping a few feet away. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. She held a plain white envelope in her hands, creasing it nervously between her fingers. "Rachel," I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the surge of emotion I felt. I removed my gardening gloves and stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. "This is a surprise." She glanced around the garden, taking in the neat rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. "Your garden looks nice. The tomatoes are coming." Well, small talk. We were reduced to small talk after everything that had happened. I waited, giving her the space to say whatever she had come to say. "Lucas asked about you yesterday," she finally said. "He wanted to know if you were still mad at us." "I was never mad at Lucas," I clarified. "And I'm not mad at you or Jason either. I'm just tired. Tired of being invisible." Rachel nodded, her gaze dropping to the envelope in her hands. "I've been thinking a lot about what you showed us, about all the things you've done for us over the years." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I never realized how much I've leaned on you, how much I've taken you for granted." She held out the envelope. "It's not much, but it's a start." I took it, feeling its weight. "Rachel, I didn't show you those numbers because I wanted repayment." "I know," she said quickly, "but I want to, not just the money, but—" She gestured vaguely, struggling to find the words. "I want to do better, be better, for you, for Lucas, for myself." I opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a handwritten letter. I looked up at her, questioning. "Read it later," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "It's easier for me to write some things than to say them." I nodded, slipping the envelope into my pocket. "Would you like to come in? I was about to make some lemonade." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I can't stay. I have a job interview in an hour." "A job interview? But what about your position at the marketing firm?" "I'm keeping that," she explained. "This is for a part-time weekend. Job at the mall. I'm trying to get my finances in order, pay off some debts." She met my eyes directly for the first time since arriving. Stand on my own 2 feet for once. Pride swelled in my chest. Not the maternal pride I was accustomed to feeling when my children achieved something, but a different kind. The pride of seeing someone you love choose a harder path because it's the right one. "I'm proud of you," I said simply. Rachel's eyes welled with tears. "I've been seeing a therapist," she blurted out. "Since Monday. I called first thing in the morning and got an emergency appointment. I've only had 2 sessions, but it's helping me see things differently." I stepped forward and hugged her, feeling her stiffen in surprise before gradually relaxing into the embrace. "When was the last time we had hugged like this? Not the perfunctory hellos and goodbyes, but a real embrace." "Take your time," I told her as we separated. "We've got plenty of it." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I should go. Don't want to be late." As she turned to leave, she paused. Lucas has a soccer game on Saturday, 3 o'clock at Morrison Park. He'd really like it if you came. I'll be there, I promised. I watched her drive away, the envelope heavy in my pocket. Inside my house, I sat at the kitchen table and opened her letter with trembling fingers. Mum, I don't know where to start. I'm sorry feels too small for all the ways I've hurt you. I've been thinking about why I got so defensive at dinner. The truth is, seeing those numbers made me feel ashamed. Not just of taking your money, but of needing it. Of failing so many times while Jason seemed to succeed at everything. My therapist asked me a question yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. She asked, "Who are you competing with?" I said Jason, of course. But then she asked why, and I couldn't answer. And then she asked if maybe I was competing with you too, trying to prove I didn't need my mother anymore. That hit home. Harder than I want to admit. I've been angry for so long. At Dad for dying. At Jason for making everything look so easy. At myself for every mistake. And somewhere along the way, I started being angry at you too, for being the voice in my head, reminding me of my failures, even though that voice was never really yours. The enclosed check is just a beginning. I'm working on a payment plan. Not because you asked for it, but because I need to do this for myself, for my own integrity. I'm also trying to show Lucas a different way. He noticed more than I realized. When we got home Sunday night, he asked me why we never help you the way you help us. I didn't have a good answer. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know I'm trying to change. Love, Rachel. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, but of recognition. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by my daughter. That night, I placed Rachel's letter in my nightstand drawer and slept dreamlessly, deeply. The following morning brought no word from Jason, but somehow the silence felt different now. A pause rather than an ending. Thursday evening found me at Nancy's house for book club, nervously clutching a bottle of wine as I rang the doorbell. I hadn't socialized much since Mark died, always finding reasons to decline invitations. Too busy, too tired, saving for Rachel's emergency, helping with Lucas's school expenses. Nancy opened the door with a wide smile. "Maggie, you actually came." She pulled me into a warm hug. "Ladies," she called over her shoulder, "look who finally joined us." The living room held 5 other women, all roughly my age, all smiling welcomingly. I recognized some from the school where I'd worked, others from around the neighborhood. "We're discussing the Midnight Library this month," Nancy explained, guiding me to an empty armchair. "But honestly, the book is just an excuse for wine and gossip for the next 2 hours. I sat in Nancy's comfortable living room, sipping wine and listening to these women debate the book's merits, share stories about their grandchildren, complain about retirement, and laugh about online dating disasters. It felt strange at first, almost self-indulgent to be spending an evening this way, but gradually I felt something inside me unwinding, relaxing. "Same time next month." "Maggie?" Nancy asked as the evening wound down. "We're reading Where the Crawdads Sing next." "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to realize how much I meant it. Driving home, I noticed the Grand Canyon brochure I'd placed on my passenger seat that morning, a reminder of dreams deferred but not forgotten. On impulse, I pulled into the parking lot of the public library, which I knew stayed open, late on Thursdays. Inside, I approached the reference desk where a kind-faced librarian looked up from her computer. "Can I help you? Do you have books about the Grand Canyon, and maybe about traveling alone as a senior woman?" She smiled, leading me to a section filled with travel guides. "Planning a trip?" "Yes," I said, the word feeling both frightening and exhilarating on my tongue. "I think I am." Saturday arrived with perfect soccer weather, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze stirring the air. I arrived at Morrison Park 30 minutes early, a habit from years of being the designated team snack mom when Jason and Rachel were young. I found a spot on the aluminum bleachers and settled in, watching as families began to arrive. Lucas spotted me before Rachel did. He was warming up with his team, kicking a ball back and forth with a freckle-faced boy. When he saw me, his whole face lit up, and he waved enthusiastically. I waved back, warmth spreading through my chest. Whatever tension existed between me and my children, Lucas remained untouched by it, a blessing I hadn't fully appreciated until now. Rachel arrived moments later, juggling a folding chair, a cooler, and what looked like a team poster. She scanned the bleachers, her expression changing from harried to relieved when she saw me. She made her way over, setting down her burdens with a sigh. "You came?" she said, sounding faintly surprised despite having invited me herself. "I said I would," I replied simply. She nodded, unfolding her chair next to the bleachers. "Jason might come later," he said. "He'd try to make it for the second half." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart quickened at the mention of my son. That would be nice. We sat in companionable silence as the game began, cheering when Lucas made a good play and groaning sympathetically when he missed a pass. It felt almost normal, this shared focus on Lucas allowing us to temporarily set aside the heavier things between. "Sis, I got the weekend job," Rachel said during halftime, her eyes still on the field where Lucas was huddled with his team. "At Nordstrom, employee discount will help with Lucas's school clothes." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "How are you managing the hours with your regular job?" "It's tough," she admitted, "but good, you know? Feels like I'm finally taking control instead of just reacting all the time." She glanced at me. "My therapist says I have a pattern of learned helplessness, making myself the victim so others will rescue me." "That sounds hard to hear," I said carefully. She gave a short laugh. "Yeah, it wasn't my favorite session." She paused, then added more softly, "But she's right, I've been doing it with you for years." Before I could respond, the referee's whistle blew, signaling the start of the second half. Our conversation lapsed as we refocused on the game. Lucas's team was down by 1 goal, and the intensity on the field had noticeably increased. Lucas played midfield, his lanky legs covering ground quickly, as he intercepted passes and moved the ball toward the opposing goal. About 15 minutes into the second half, he broke away with the ball, dribbling past 2 defenders. "Go, Lucas!" Rachel shouted, jumping to her feet. I found myself standing too, caught up in the excitement as Lucas approached the goal. He pulled his leg back and kicked, sending the ball soaring past the goalkeeper's outstretched hands. The net billowed as the ball hit home, and Lucas threw his arms up in celebration. "Yes!" Rachel screamed, turning to high-five me without thinking. Our hands connected in a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. That's when I saw Jason standing at the edge of the field in his business-casual Saturday attire, watching us. Our eyes met over Rachel's shoulder, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then he raised his hand in a tentative wave. I waved back, my heart in my throat. He made his way over to us, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Sorry I'm late," he said, directing the apology more to Rachel than to me. "Meeting ran long." "You're here now," Rachel replied. "Lucas just scored." Jason smiled, his first genuine expression since arriving. I saw. Kid's got skills. The 3 of us watched the remainder of the game together, an awkward family tableau. Jason stood slightly apart, his posture stiff, occasionally checking his phone. When Lucas's team won 3-2, we all cheered, momentarily united in celebration. After the game, Lucas bounded over, sweaty and flushed with victory. "Did you see my goal?" he asked, his question encompassing all of us, but his eyes on me. "It was beautiful," I told him, resisting the urge to smooth his damp hair. "Perfect setup and execution. Coach says I have good field vision," he announced proudly. "That's great, buddy," Jason said, giving his nephew a fist bump. "Nice work out there." "Uncle Jason, you came." Lucas's excitement at seeing his uncle made something twist inside me. Despite everything, family mattered to this boy. Family connections mattered. "Listen," Rachel said, checking her watch. "We were planning to grab pizza at Mario's to celebrate. You're both welcome to join us." She glanced between Jason and me, her invitation genuine but cautious. "I'd like that," I said. Jason hesitated, his fingers tightening around his phone. "I should probably get back." "Please, Uncle Jason," Lucas pleaded. "They have the arcade games you like." Something in Jason's expression shifted, softened. "Well, when you put it that way, how can I refuse?" Mario's Pizza was crowded with Saturday families, the air thick with the scent of tomato sauce and melting cheese. We secured a corner booth, Lucas immediately disappearing to the arcade with a handful of quarters from Jason. Left alone, the 3 of us adults sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. Jason took a long sip of his beer, then set it down with deliberate care. "I've been thinking about Sunday dinner," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "About what you showed us, Mom." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I talked to my financial advisor on Monday," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I've set up a monthly transfer to your account. It's not the full amount, but over time." "Jason," I interrupted gently, "I didn't show you those numbers because I wanted repayment." "I know that," he said, an edge of frustration in his voice, "but it's the right thing to do. It's what Dad would have expected of me." The mention of Mark hung in the air between us. Jason had always tried so hard to live up to what he imagined his father would want. Sometimes, I thought, at the expense of figuring out what he wanted for himself. "Your father would be proud of you," I said softly. "Not because of your job or your house or how much money you make, because you're a good man who tries to do the right thing." Jason's eyes glistened, and he looked away quickly, blinking rapidly. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand, a gesture of sibling solidarity I hadn't seen in years. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice rough, "for what I said at the party about you being bitter, jealous of my success. That was Emily talking, not me, but I let her say it and I didn't defend you, and that's just as bad." I felt a pang at the mention of Emily. "Where is Emily today?" Jason's mouth tightened. "At her mother's. We're taking some space right now." Rachel and I exchanged surprised glances. Jason and Emily had always presented a united front, their marriage seemingly as polished and perfect as their home decor. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. Jason shrugged, trying for nonchalance but achieving something closer to sadness. "It's been coming for a while. Sunday just brought some things to a head." Before we could pursue this revelation further, Lucas returned, breathless with excitement over his arcade. Victories. The conversation shifted to safer territory: Lucas's soccer season, an upcoming school science fair, Rachel's new weekend job. As we shared a large pepperoni pizza, I noticed something shifting between us. The tension wasn't gone, but it had eased. We were talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Not just superficial updates or logistical planning, but actual conversation. Jason asked Rachel about her therapy. Rachel asked me about book club. I told them both about my tentative research into a Grand Canyon trip. "By yourself?" Jason asked, looking concerned. "There are senior tour groups," I explained. "Nancy from book club did one last year, said it was wonderful." "That sounds amazing, Grandma," Lucas said, his eyes wide. "Can you bring me back a rock?" "Lucas, you can't ask for souvenirs before someone even goes on a trip," Rachel admonished, but without real heat. "It's okay," I laughed. "Yes, Lucas, I'll bring you back a rock." The evening wound down gently, comfortably. As we prepared to leave, Jason hesitated by the door, then pulled me into an awkward hug. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said quietly. "Maybe we could have lunch next week. Just us?" "I'd like that," I replied, my heart full. Driving home alone, I realized something important had shifted. The envelope I'd placed on the dinner table had done more than reveal a financial ledger. It had opened a space for truth between us, difficult, uncomfortable truth, but truth nonetheless. And in that space, something new was beginning to grow. The following Wednesday, I met Jason for lunch at Riverside Cafe, a quiet spot overlooking the Catawba River. I arrived early, choosing a table on the outdoor patio where the spring breeze carried the scent of blooming dogwoods. Jason had suggested this place, remembering it was where Mark used to take me for our anniversary dinners. The thoughtfulness of this choice wasn't lost on me. When Jason arrived, he looked different somehow, less polished, more human. His usual crisp business attire had been replaced by jeans and a simple button-down shirt. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he hadn't bothered with his usual styling products. The change suited him. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Traffic on Providence was backed up." "You're right on time," I assured him, passing him a menu. I was early. We ordered grilled salmon for me, a club sandwich for him, and fell into an awkward silence as the waitress departed. Jason fidgeted with his water glass, turning it slowly between his palms. "Emily and I are separating," he said finally, the words tumbling out as if he'd been holding them back. "We've been having problems for a while, but after Sunday dinner, things came to a head." I kept my expression neutral, though my heart ached for him. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jason. Is there anything I can do?" He shook his head, a rueful smile touching his lips. "Not unless you can make the last 5 years disappear." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The truth is, we've been living separate lives under the same roof for a long time now. Emily has her social circle, her Charity boards, her image to maintain. And I have my work. Just work? I asked gently. His eyes met mine, then skittered away. Yeah, that's part of the problem, isn't it? Just work. No real friends, no hobbies, no life outside the office? He took a sip of water. Emily pointed that out during our fight Sunday night. Said I was turning into a robot. Said she was tired of being married too. Someone who measures his worth by his bank account. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. It's funny, he continued. She accused me of caring too much about money, but when I suggested we scale back, move to a smaller house, take fewer vacations, she looked at me like I'd suggested we live in a cardboard box. Our food arrived, providing a welcome interruption. We ate in silence for a few moments, the tension easing somewhat as we focused on our meals. You know, I said eventually, your father and I almost divorced once. Jason's fork froze halfway to his mouth. What? When? When you were about 5, Rachel was still a baby. Your father had just been promoted at the firm and suddenly we were in a different social circle. Country club memberships, dinner parties with partners, expectations. I smiled at the memory. I hated it, all of it. The pretense, the competition, the keeping up with the Joneses. Dad loved that stuff, Jason said, confusion evident in his voice. I shook my head. No, he didn't. He thought I did. We spent almost a year miscommunicating, each of us trying to make the other happy by doing things we thought they wanted, growing more miserable by the day. What happened? We finally talked, really talked. Turned out we both wanted a simpler life, more time together as a family, less focus on appearances. I took a sip of my iced tea. We downsized from that big house in Dilworth to the ranch house where I still live. Your father took a lateral move that meant less prestige but regular hours. We were happier with less. Jason was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this new information about his parents. I don't remember the big house, he said finally. You were young, but you loved the ranch house from day one. You said it felt like a real home. He nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that house a lot lately. How different it was from the one Emily and I bought. Ours looks like a magazine spread, but it's never felt like home. What do you want, Jason? I asked. Not what you think you should want, or what Emily wants, or what your colleagues expect. What do you want? He stared out at the river, watching a pair of ducks glide across the surface. I don't know, he admitted softly. I've been following a script for so long I'm not sure I remember how to write my own story anymore. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. Then maybe this is your chance to figure it out. His fingers curled around mine, squeezing gently. I've been thinking about Dad a lot, too. About what he would think of the man I've become. He would be proud of your work ethic, your intelligence, your determination, I said honestly. But he would want you to be happy, Jason. That mattered to him more than anything else. Was he? Happy, I mean. Yes, I said without hesitation. Not every minute of every day, of course. Life isn't like that. But in the ways that matter most. Yes, he was a happy man. Jason nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. I want to be more like him, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Less like, he gestured vaguely, encompassing his designer watch, his manicured nails, the trappings of success he'd accumulated. You are like him, I assured him. More than you know, you just got a little lost along the way, but you're finding your path back. We finished our lunch, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, memories of family camping trips when the kids were young, Mark's legendary inability to barbecue without setting something on fire, the summer Jason broke his arm falling out of the treehouse his father had built. When the check came, Jason reached for it automatically, but I placed my hand over his. This one's on me, I said firmly. He started to protest, then stopped, understanding dawning in his eyes. Thank you, he said simply. As we walked to our cars, Jason hesitated, then pulled a thick envelope from his back pocket. I know you said you don't want repayment, he began. I opened my mouth to object, but he held up a hand. This isn't about the money, Mom. It's about responsibility, about making things right. He pressed the envelope into my hands. Please, I need to do this. I took it, recognizing that this was as much for him as it was for me. Okay. And there's something else, he added, his expression softening. I put in for some vacation time, 2 weeks in July. I was thinking, maybe we could take that Grand Canyon trip together, if you want company, that is. My heart swelled. I'd like that very much. He nodded, a genuine smile breaking across his face. Me too. As I drove home, the envelope on the passenger seat beside me, I felt lighter than I had in years. The money inside was significant. I'd peeked at the check before pulling away from the restaurant, but it wasn't the dollars and cents that mattered. It was what they represented: recognition, respect, a rebalancing of our relationship. For the first time since Mark died, I felt like more than just Mom. I felt like Maggie again. Book club became the highlight of my weeks. Every Thursday evening, I joined Nancy and the other women, Elaine, Patty, Denise, Martha, and occasionally Judith, when her arthritis wasn't acting up, for wine, snacks, and conversations that wandered far beyond whatever book we were supposedly discussing. "I'm telling you," Patty insisted one evening in late April, "online dating at our age is a contact sport. Last week I matched with a man who seemed perfect. Retired dentist, loves dogs, enjoys hiking. Turns out, his profile picture was from 1985, and he now weighs 300 pounds and can barely walk to his mailbox. At least he was actually single," Martha countered. "Remember that widower I told you about? Wife called me personally to inform me he was very much married, and she was very much alive." The women dissolved into laughter, myself included. There was something profoundly liberating about these evenings. The honesty, the humor, the shared understanding that came from women who had lived full lives and had the battle scars to prove it. "What about you, Maggie?" Nancy asked, refilling my wine glass. "Any interest in dipping your toe back in the dating pool?" I shook my head, smiling. "I haven't thought about dating in, well, decades, honestly. It's been, 20 years since Markham." "Passed?" Elaine asked gently. 23, I corrected. "And I've been busy. Busy raising your kids, supporting your kids, bankrolling your kids," Patty said with a knowing nod. "But they're adults now. Isn't it time for some Maggie time?" The question caught me off guard. Maggie time. The concept seemed almost foreign, like a language I'd once known but had long forgotten. I wouldn't even know where to begin, I admitted. "Begin with you," Nancy suggested. "Who is Maggie Reynolds when she's not being Mom or Grandma? What does she like? What makes her happy?" I stared into my wine glass, searching for answers that should have been obvious but weren't. "I used to love baking," I said finally. "Not just cookies for the kids or potluck desserts, but really challenging recipes. French. Pastries, artisan breads." "That's a start," Nancy encouraged. "What else?" "I used to paint. Watercolors mostly. Landscapes. I wasn't great, but I enjoyed it." "Why did you stop?" Denise asked. I shrugged. "No time, no space. After Mark died, I converted my little art corner in the spare bedroom into storage for the kids' things they couldn't fit in their college dorms." "And now?" Martha prompted. "Now that room is full of boxes. Rachel's college textbooks she never came back for, Jason's sports trophies, photo albums I keep meaning to organize." The women exchanged knowing glances. "I think," Nancy said carefully, "that room might be a metaphor for your life, Maggie." The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I had filled every corner of my existence with my children's needs, their belongings, their emergencies, leaving no space for myself. That night, after returning home from book club, I stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, really seeing it for the first time in years. Nancy was right. It was a metaphor made manifest. Boxes stacked haphazardly, plastic tubs labeled with my children's names, bins of holiday, decorations I no longer put up, old files from a job I'd retired from 5 years ago. I stepped into the room, moving purposefully to the closet. Behind the winter coats and rarely used vacuum cleaner, I found what I was looking for: my old easel, folded flat, and a plastic case containing my watercolor supplies. I pulled them out, dust billowing as I set them on the bed. The easel's wood was still smooth beneath my fingers, the hinges stiff but functional. I opened the supply case, expecting dried-out paints and ruined brushes, but found everything preserved, waiting patiently for my return. That weekend, I began clearing out the spare room. I started small, one box at a time, sorting items into piles, keep, donate, trash. I texted photos to Jason and Rachel, asking which of their childhood belongings they actually wanted to keep. Rachel came over on Saturday to help, bringing Lucas along. Together we sorted through her college textbooks, all donated, high school yearbooks, kept, and boxes of clothing she hadn't worn in a decade, mostly donated, with a few vintage pieces set aside. "I can't believe you saved all this," she said, holding up a papier-mâché solar system she'd made in 4th grade. Why did you keep it? I shrugged, embarrassed. It felt like I was preserving pieces of you, of your childhood. She looked at me, really looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. But not pieces of you, Mum. You were preserving us at the expense of yourself. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in my throat. Rachel set down the solar system and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never realized what I was taking from you. Lucas, who had been going through a box of old toys, looked up. Mom, Grandma, look what I found. He held up a stack of watercolor paintings, landscapes, still lifes, a few attempts at portraits. My old work, preserved between sheets of tissue paper. Grandma, did you paint these? He asked, eyes wide with admiration. They're really good. She used to paint all the time, Rachel said, taking one of the watercolors, a study of the lake where we'd vacationed when she was small. I'd forgotten about that. I want to start again, I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke the words. That's why I'm clearing this room. I want to turn it into a studio, a space just for me. Rachel smiled, squeezing my hand. I think that's a wonderful idea. By Sunday afternoon, the room was half empty, with only a few boxes left to sort. I positioned my easel near the window, where the natural light was best, and set up my paints on an old desk we'd moved from the garage. That evening, I sat before a blank sheet of paper, brush in hand, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. The first strokes were hesitant, clumsy, but gradually my hand remembered its old skill. I painted until the sunset faded, and I had to turn on the lamp, losing myself in the familiar dance of water and pigment. The finished painting wasn't particularly good, a simple study of the dogwood tree outside my window, but it was mine. A small reclamation of self, a declaration that Maggie Reynolds still existed beneath the layers of Mom and Grandma. The following week brought more changes. Jason helped me haul the remaining boxes to his garage for temporary storage until he and Rachel could go through them. I painted the spare room a soft sage green, hung simple curtains in a cream fabric, and positioned a comfortable reading chair in the corner opposite my art supplies. Each evening, I spent at least an hour in my new studio, sometimes painting, sometimes simply sitting in the chair with a book, enjoying the quiet. The space became a sanctuary, a place where I could reconnect with parts of myself I'd nearly forgotten. Nancy noticed the change in me at the next book club meeting. You look different, she observed as I helped arrange cheese and crackers on her dining room table. More present somehow. I smiled, realizing she was right. I feel different, like I'm waking up after a very long sleep. About time, Patty declared, overhearing our conversation as she entered with a bottle of wine. Now, are you ready for the next step in Operation Maggie Revival? There are steps? I asked, laughing. Absolutely, Nancy confirmed. Step 1 was acknowledgement, recognizing you'd lost yourself. Step 2 was reclamation, taking back space, time, identity. And step 3? I asked, both amused and curious. Patty and Nancy exchanged mischievous glances. Adventure, they said in unison. That night, as the book discussion wound down, Nancy handed me a brochure, not for the Grand Canyon, but for a week-long watercolor workshop in Asheville, scheduled for the first week of June. It's taught by Elizabeth Greer, she explained. She's apparently quite famous in watercolor circles. The class is almost full, but I called, and they're holding a spot for you until tomorrow. I stared at the brochure, excitement and anxiety warring within me. I don't know, I hedged. I'm just a beginner again, really, and a week away. A week away from what? Patty challenged gently. Your empty house? Your adult children who are finally standing on their own feet? Your grandson who would actually think it's pretty cool that his grandma is taking an art class? Put that way, my excuses sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Registration deadline is tomorrow, Nancy reminded me. No pressure, but actually yes, pressure. Say yes, Maggie. Say yes to yourself for once. I took a deep breath, feeling as though I stood on the edge of a cliff, terrified yet exhilarated by the prospect of jumping. Yes, I said, and the word felt like freedom on my tongue. Yes, I'll go. That night, I called both Jason and Rachel to tell them about the workshop. Their support was immediate and enthusiastic, another small sign of how our relationships were shifting, rebalancing. That sounds amazing. Mom, Rachel said, Lucas and I can water your plants while you're gone. Asheville's beautiful in June, Jason added during our call, and it's perfect timing. You'll be back before our Grand Canyon trip in July. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror and paused, really looking at my reflection. The woman who gazed back at me looked different. Somehow, still the same silver-streaked hair and laugh lines, but her eyes held a spark that had been missing for too long. "Hello, Maggie," I whispered to my reflection. "Welcome back." The Asheville Arts Center occupied a renovated textile mill, all exposed brick and soaring ceilings, with massive windows that flooded the studios with natural light. I stood in the entrance, my art supplies tucked, under one arm fighting the urge to turn around and drive straight back to Charlotte. "First time here?" asked a woman about my age, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob, eyes bright behind tortoise-shell glasses. I nodded, clutching my bag tighter. "First time anywhere, really. At least in a very long time." She smiled, extending her hand. "I'm Diane. First timer too. Terrified I'll be the worst. One in the class." "Maggie," I replied, feeling an immediate kinship with this woman who'd named my exact fear. "If you're the worst, I'll have to settle for second worst." We laughed, the tension easing as we made our way together towards Studio C, where the watercolor workshop would be held. The room was already half full, with about 15 other students arranging their supplies at long tables. Positioned to face a central demonstration area, Elizabeth Greer wasn't what I'd expected. I'd imagined someone austere and intimidating, but the woman who greeted us was warm and approachable, with laugh lines around her eyes and paint-stained fingers. "Welcome, artists," she said once we'd all settled. "Whether you've been painting for decades or just picked up a brush yesterday, you belong. Here, this week isn't about creating masterpieces. It's about reconnecting with your creative spirit." As she spoke, something inside me relaxed. I wasn't here to become a professional artist or to impress anyone. I was here to find joy in the process, to remember what it felt like to create something simply for the pleasure of creation. The days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent in the studio learning techniques and working on guided projects. Afternoons offered free painting time or optional excursions to scenic locations around Asheville. Evenings were for casual dinners with fellow students, sharing stories and laughter over local food and wine. Diane and I became fast friends, along with two other women in our age range, Sylvia, a retired librarian from Georgia, and Marianne, a widow from Tennessee who'd started painting after her husband's death. We called ourselves the late bloomers, joking that we were having our artistic awakening just a few decades behind schedule. "It's never too late to become who you were meant to be," Marianne said one evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on the porch of the bed and breakfast where we were all staying. "That's what I tell my children when they worry I'm having some kind of breakdown, because I sold the family home and bought an apartment above an art gallery." "Are you?" Sylvia asked with a grin. "Absolutely," Marianne laughed. "Best breakdown I've ever had." On the fourth day, Elizabeth announced that we would be painting portraits of ourselves. A collective groan rose from the class. I know," she said, holding up her hands. "Everyone hates self-portraits, but they're not really about capturing your likeness. They're about seeing yourself, truly seeing, perhaps for the first time." She positioned mirrors at each of our stations. "Don't focus on making it look exactly like you. Focus on expressing who you are, how you feel, what matters to you." I stared at my reflection, really studying. My face, the lines around my eyes and mouth, the slight softening along my jawline, the silver strands woven through my hair. But instead of seeing flaws or signs of age, I saw evidence of a life lived, of laughter and tears, of strength and resilience. When Elizabeth came to check my progress, she paused longer than usual, studying my work with genuine interest. "There's something powerful happening here, Maggie," she said quietly. "You're not just painting a face, you're telling a story." By the time I finished, my self-portrait looked nothing like the carefully rendered, technically precise works I'd done in my youth. It was looser, more expressive, with colors that reflected emotion rather than reality. But somehow it captured something essential about me that a more literal representation never could have. "It's beautiful," Diane said, peering over my shoulder. "It looks like freedom." On our final evening, the center hosted a small exhibition of work created during the workshop. Each student selected one piece to display. I chose my self-portrait, though part of me still felt it was too personal, too revealing to share. As I stood beside my painting, a young woman approached, studying it with obvious interest. She couldn't have been more than 30, with vibrant blue hair and multiple earrings lining each ear. "This is incredible," she said. "The emotion in it. I'm an art therapist, and this is exactly the kind of breakthrough I hope for with my clients." "Thank you," I replied, surprised and touched by her response. "I'm just a beginner, really." She shook her head firmly. "No way. You might be returning to art after a break, but there's years of life experience in this painting. That can't be taught." Her words stayed with me long after the exhibition ended, through the farewell dinner with my new friends, through the exchange of phone numbers and promises to keep in touch, through the long drive home to Charlotte the next day. Years of life experience. Not wasted years, not lost years, but experience that had value, that informed who I was now and what I could create. I arrived home to find my house transformed. A banner hung in the entryway reading, "Welcome home, artist grandma." The refrigerator was stocked with fresh groceries, and a vase of sunflowers, my favorites, brightened the kitchen table. On the counter was a note in Rachel's handwriting. "Lucas and I cleaned the house. Jason brought groceries. We're all coming for dinner tomorrow to see your paintings. Rest well, Mom. We love you." I touched the note, my heart full. This was new territory, my children caring for me instead of the other way around. Not because I was ill or incapable, but simply as an act of love and support. That night, I hung my self-portrait in my bedroom, where I would see it every morning, a daily reminder of the woman I was rediscovering, the woman I was becoming. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized I was looking forward to tomorrow, to sharing my art with my family, to the Grand Canyon trip with Jason in July, to more workshops and book clubs and quiet mornings in my studio. For the first time in decades, I was looking forward not just to what I could do for others, but to what life might hold for me. The summer unfolded like a watercolor painting, colors bleeding into one another, creating something more beautiful than I could have imagined. My trip to the Grand Canyon with Jason in July was a revelation for us both. "I can't believe we waited so long to do this," Jason said as we stood at the south rim, watching the setting sun transform the ancient rock layers into bands of gold, crimson, and purple. "Dad would have loved this." "He would," I agreed, linking my arm through his. "But he's here with us in a way, don't you think?" Jason nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I feel closer to him here than I have in years, and closer to you too, Mum. We spent our days hiking the easier trails, taking photographs, sketching, me and journaling, Jason to my surprise, and our evenings talking in a way we never had before, as adults, as equals, as friends." He told me about his ongoing separation from Emily, his decision to scale back at work, his interest in possibly teaching business courses at the community college. "I want a life with meaning," he confessed one night as we sat on the balcony of our lodge. "Not just achievements." "You sound like your father," I told him, and watched his face light up at the comparison. When we returned to Charlotte, Jason moved into a modest apartment downtown, a far cry from the sprawling house he'd shared with Emily. "It feels more like me," he explained when I visited, gesturing to the simple furnishings and the walls lined with books instead of expensive art. Rachel, too, continued her transformation. She stuck with therapy, worked both jobs without complaint, and slowly began repaying me in small installments that I tried to refuse but eventually accepted, recognizing that this was important for her sense of independence and self-respect. Lucas flourished as he watched his mother stand on her own feet. His grades improved. He became more confident in soccer, and he started spending Saturday mornings with me, learning to paint while I baked the French pastries I'd finally mastered. "You're different, Grandma," he observed one morning as we painted side by side in my studio. "Happier." "I am," I acknowledged, touched by his perception. "I'm finding my way back to myself." "I like it," he declared, "and I like having a grandma who's an artist. It's cool." By Thanksgiving, subtle but significant shifts had occurred in our family dynamic. For the first time ever, we held the holiday meal at Rachel's apartment. She'd saved for months to buy a proper dining table, and though the space was tight and the menu simplified, it was one of the most enjoyable Thanksgivings we'd ever had. Jason brought his new girlfriend, Claire, a kind, unpretentious high school English teacher, who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know all of us. Emily sent Lucas an expensive gift, but made excuses not to come, which seemed to bother no one, least of all Lucas. As we gathered around Rachel's table, I looked at the faces of my family, my strong, resilient daughter, My son who had found the courage to redefine success on his own terms. My grandson growing into a thoughtful young man. Even Claire, potentially a new addition to our circle, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Before we eat," Jason said, raising his glass, "I'd like to make a toast." He turned to me, his expression solemn. "To Mom, who taught us what real love looks like even when we were too blind to see it. To Grandma," Lucas chimed in, "the coolest artist." "I know." "To Mom," Rachel added, her eyes bright with tears, "who never gave up on us even when we gave her every reason to." I blinked back my own tears, overwhelmed by their words, by how far we had come from that tense Sunday dinner 9 months ago. After the meal, as we lingered over coffee and pie, Jason disappeared briefly, returning with a flat, rectangular package wrapped in simple brown paper. "This is from both of us," he said, placing it before me. "Rachel and I have been working on it for months." Curious, I unwrapped it carefully. Inside was what appeared to be a ledger, bound in soft leather, with the Ledger of Love embossed in gold on the cover. Opening it, I found not columns of figures and dollar amounts, but a different kind of accounting. Each page documented a year of our family life, with entries detailing not financial transactions but moments of love and sacrifice. 1998, Jason's college graduation. Mom's contribution: drove 8 hours each way when her car broke down halfway there. Arrived with only minutes to spare, her shoes soaked because she had to walk the last mile in the rain. 2002, Rachel's emergency appendectomy. Mom's contribution: stayed at the hospital for 36 hours straight. Argued with insurance company daily for 2 weeks to ensure coverage. 2015, Lucas's science project. Mom's contribution: stayed up until 2 a.m. helping with research after working a double shift at the school. Page after page chronicled the 1,000 small and large ways I had loved them, not with money, though that was included too, but with time, energy, presence, and unwavering support. "We realized," Rachel explained softly, "that the money was never really what mattered. It was just the most visible part of what you gave us." "We've been interviewing everyone who knows you," Jason added. "Teachers you worked with, neighbors, Dad's old friends, trying to capture the full picture of all you've done, not just for us, but for everyone around you." I traced the entries with trembling fingers, too moved to speak. "We can never repay you, Mom," Rachel said, covering my hand with hers. "Not really, but we can acknowledge it, honor it, and try to live up to the example you've set. And we can make sure Lucas knows this history," Jason added, "so he understands what family really means." Lucas, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "I have something too, Grandma." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone with swirls of red and orange. "It's not from the Grand Canyon. Uncle Jason already gave you one of those. This one's from my soccer field. I found it the day you came back to watch me play after, the dinner with the fork." He placed it in my palm. "I kept it because it reminded me of that day when I really saw you for the first time." I closed my fingers around the stone, its surface warm from being carried close to my grandson's heart. "Thank you," I said finally, looking at each of their faces. "Not just for this beautiful gift, but for seeing me, truly seeing me. That's all I ever wanted." Later that night, after everyone had gone home and I was alone in my quiet house, I sat in my studio with the ledger open on my lap. I turned to the final page, where I found not an entry but a blank space with a single sentence written at the top. The continuing story of Maggie Reynolds, artist, mother, grandmother, and the heart of our family. Below it was taped a photograph taken at the Grand Canyon, Jason and me standing at the rim, arms around each other, laughing at something now forgotten. My hair was windblown, my face free of makeup, my expression one of pure joy. I ran my fingers over the image, remembering that moment, the feeling of standing on the edge of something vast and beautiful and ancient. Life was like that canyon, I realized, layer upon layer of experience, carved out by time and love and sometimes pain, creating something of breathtaking beauty. My life wasn't over. It was continuing to unfold in ways I couldn't have imagined a year ago. There would be more art classes, more book clubs, more family dinners. There would be challenges too, no doubt. Life never stops presenting those. But whatever came next, I would face it as my full self, not just as Mom or Grandma, but as Maggie, a woman who had learned at 62 that it's never too late to Reclaim your own story. I picked up my brush and paints, inspired by the photo from the Grand Canyon, as I began to work, blending colors to capture that moment of connection between mother and son against the backdrop of nature's grandeur. I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The ledger of my life had many pages yet to be filled, and for the first time in decades, I couldn't wait to see what would be written there.